Good morning. Has the meeting started? Because I'm not hearing anything. Let me know, please. Thank you.
Good morning. I've been here for over 10 or so minutes and I've been heard anything either. So no, it has not yet started. But I wish it would.
Thanks much. Thank you.
Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. What time will this meeting start?
Well, the communication that I
Good morning, everyone.
at 10.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let me take the opportunity to sincerely apologize for the late start. We are 16 minutes late because of some technical difficulties. With technology, technology is here to mold stuff, whatever our augment, whatever our goals are, but also there are some challenges at times. And luckily, we're able to rectify them in very short order. Let me take the opportunity to welcome you here this morning. I see we have 127 persons online. And let me also say a special welcome to our Caribbean partners from the Barbados Islands, the Bahamas, Bermuda, who again have extended a very wide reach in terms of their respective registration for their respective centers. Let me take the wonderful opportunity to commend the teachers here locally and in the region who have toiled, who have continued to work hard to ensure that our students here and over the waters in the Caribbean continues to see the respective exams, the math and English skills as viable options for qualification extensively. It is indeed a pleasure to host you in this forum. We are more so thrilled to see the numbers climbing to be a part of this workshop, where speaking and listening continues to be a challenge as it relates to the English skills. However, your commitment this morning by joining speaks volume to the commitment you have for the nation's children and the respective institutions you represent. I must acknowledge the respective members from the respective ministries of education that are on, from Bahamas, Barbados, and Bermuda, and in particular the respective members from the Ministry of Education here, beloved island Jamaica. Thank you again for joining. At this point in time, I know you will be engaged through the session. We also acknowledge the presence of members from the Cayman Islands, again, who have made a significant increase in terms of their registration by way of the prospective candidates who are registered for this year. So again, I want you to be engaged, be comfortable as possible, and when the time is presented, you ask the respective questions. Ms. Brand is more than capable and able to assist. And one of the greatest joys that she has a passion for what she does. She loves it. It highlights the importance of the need for language in the development of a social space, and educationally, it will all argue well when our students sit the exam first and foremost. That's something that we need to improve on, ensuring that they come back and sit the exam and eventually become successful in terms of passing the respective exam. So I now hand over to Ms. Rashid Reed, our Business Development Manager, who will take you further into the morning proceedings. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today. I know Dr. Ron already kind of introduced Ms. Sylvia Bryan, but I want to take the opportunity to do so. This right here is Ms. Sylvia Bryan. Many of you are so accustomed to her, right? She was our lead external quality assurer for English. So now she supports us in the capacity of a subject specialist. You know, if you need any special assistance, I'm volunteering her to assist you, and I know she'll be able to and willing to help. Right now, the current lead external quality assurer is Mr. David Mayers. Some of you already know him. If not, you'll come to know him. And while I speak on the process of external quality assurer, some of you would have already been contacted by him or a member of his team. So City and Guilds does a 40% sampling each year. So if it is that your school has been contacted, you need to communicate and respond to the assigned PQA so that dates can be set and met for a verification visit to be done. Ms. Colson from the Ministry of Education does support David Mayers and the City and Guilds office with the external quality assurance process. So if there's any questions that any one of you would have, you can most definitely reach out to David Mayer, Ms. Colson, of course, their office. I want to really thank our Caribbean partners who are on the call. My Jamaican colleagues don't get jealous. It's because they're seasoned. I want to specifically thank those who are on from Barbados, Bermuda, and the Cayman Islands. The process of the reason for this session is really to provide sensitization and to scaffold each and every one of you through the speaking and listening process. Some persons are a little shy when it comes on to the internal assessment, but Miss Bryan is here today to share her expertise and just to go through what is required of you and how we can extract certain things from the candidates to achieve the speaking and listening component of the English exams. So with no further ado, I will turn over to Miss Bryan, who will take you through the presentation. If it is that you have any questions, you can ask or you can wait until after, but let this session be as interactive and informative as possible. Thank you.
Good morning again, colleagues, and I just want to reinforce the welcome you have received and look forward to a very productive day. And as Rashid mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them.
We're trying to share the screen.
Okay. Yes, so we are going to begin by just looking at the mood just briefly before we look at our objectives. So it asks, should the secondary school curriculum include topics such as mental health? Now, this is a fairly straightforward topic. And so when we come to look at the issue of definitions, we won't have much to discuss. We can see which words are important: mental health, secondary school curriculum, and include. Include is important because it means much more. And you know, students might miss that. So let's go for our objectives. We are providing support to both candidates, assessors, and internal quality assurers. So we want to look at the specific activities which candidates must engage in. And we want to identify the specific activities, roles which the IQA and assessor need to play. And also I want to share with you some coaching tips which will help candidates to make their best performance, and also from the perspective of the need to satisfy the requirements of the external quality assurer so that you can maintain the best status for your center. You want to look at the documents and the records which you need to have on hand when you are visited by the external quality assurer. So let's go. You would be familiar with the fact that every stage does a listening task and a discussion. What distinguishes stage 3 is a presentation, which is done by an individual with a peer who listens, and then you have a reversal of roles. With regard to the reflection, each candidate has to answer some questions. What questions did you ask? Did you agree with your peers, etc.? I want to give a little warning about the reliability of the reflection. Time has shown that candidates sometimes write down questions which they never asked. They might have intended to ask them, but they did not. So be a bit wary about how you include the candidate's response in your evaluation of the candidate's performance. So when you come to complete your examiner record sheet, you have to bear in mind that you need to have listened to the questions and made a note so you can give the appropriate mark for that and not depend solely on the reflection of the student. Stages 1 and 2 answer recall type questions. You would have gone through with your candidates the relationship between questions and their answers. So the candidates will know that a recall type question or a right there question, a recall type question requires a right there answer. So you simply listen and you will hear the answer to the question in the recording. You don't hear anything, you don't have to evaluate anything, you simply listen for the answer. And as you know, all of the exam is related to the units which are in the handbook. So those are the units and the assessment criteria, which you see there: 2, 5, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, etc. You can notice that where you see anything that is in the 2 05, 20 anything, it's a stage 1. 304, 302, it's a stage 2. And 40 anything, that's a stage 3. Now, stage 3, as you know, requires more because it is the stage which is acceptable for matriculation into a number of tertiary institutions and into certain job areas. So the independent recall means that the question is asked, the candidate has to just respond. With the recall, chosen from the multiple choice, they are given a number of answers. They have
Yes.
to choose one. And so,
Okay,
no,
Haji. Huh? All right.
I'm trying to wait for the muting of this mic. Okay, with the evaluative free response, it means that all of the information required for that answer has to come from the candidate. The candidate has to make an inference, and this is going to be based on what has been covered in the presentation, what has not yet been covered, and from the candidate's experience. So the candidate will identify the topic. Having identified the topic, then the candidate might say, well, based on the information I got, I needed to hear more about X or Y, and so the candidate will ask that question. Now, with regard to the wide range of the topic, that there may be an area which was not covered. So let's say we were speaking about the importance of mental health for students, but there was no mention of the effect of bullying and how this can affect the mental health of students. So when they asked for question 6, what is an area of the topic that was not covered, you could accept there was no information about how to cope with bullying or how bullying affects one's mental health. So that would be an extension of that subject that was covered. We are focusing a great deal on what all of the candidates have to do, and then we want to look again at the extra thing that stage 3 has to do. So for the listening comprehension, all of the candidates are required to listen for and identify relevant information. Why relevant information? Not all of the information in the audio file is going to be needed to answer the particular questions which are posed. And so the candidate has to identify the relevant information. Teaching experience tells us that candidates often write a great deal or copy a great deal, hoping that among all those words will be the correct answer. They do not have time to write all of that anyway, and so you want to encourage them to simply choose the phrase which answers the question. So they cannot just write something that they heard. What they have to write is what is relevant to answer the question. So that is what that first bullet is for. They have to identify and then record the relevant answer. Now, for stage 3 candidates, there's going to be a question which requires them to identify multi-step instructions. Multi, you would have emphasized for your candidates that multi has to do with 3 or more instructions. Why this focus? Because manuals and different kind of instructional material requires one to recognize multi-step instructions. And in giving general instruction, one is going to have to give multi-step instructions. So this is why there's that emphasis there at stage 3. So they have to be able to listen to and recognize this in order to answer one of the questions. As I mentioned before, that they have to infer what additional information could have been presented on the topic and then ask a relevant question to get that information. And also, they will ask what is another audio file is going to be named. And so they need to suggest. So they have to identify what is the topic that this audio file is covering. What aspect has it covered? What aspect of the coverage needs some clarification? And then what other general aspect of the topic could be covered next? I want to mention, first of all, that there are guidelines in the answer sheet. I want to tell you the correct name for it. Yes, the marking guide, one of the bullets in the marking guide, as well as information in the frequently asked questions document, says specifically that there should be 3 uninterrupted planes of the audio file. At no point should the assessor stop the file so students can write. So there should be 3 planes, 3 consecutive uninterrupted planes of the audio file. Okay. Now, sometimes candidates begin to write even before the first sentence is completed. This is something which is optional, but I'm telling you from experience that it would be a better idea to have them simply listen to that first plane while keeping their eyes on the questions. If they do this, they will be able to sort of identify from early what is relevant to answer a particular question. However, they should not be prevented from writing if they want to write during that first plane. And of course, as I mentioned before, they want to use short phrases. That will help them to maximize their time, and so they can be able to move on to the next question, since there are just 3 times when they have to listen and so. So during the second plane now, they should be able to really write good answers because they would have looked at the questions and they would have heard the information which they need. By the third plane, now they should be able to complete and check their answers because they are going to hear, they might have missed something, but by the time they hear it again, they would be able to say, okay, so I need to change this or I need to put an additional word or so. So this is why we suggest that you share these coaching points with them if you have not done so before. As I mentioned before, that for the stage 3 candidate, the relationship between the question and the source of the answer is very important. Because the others are just doing recall type questions where there's right there information for the answer, they do not have such a pressure to be able to recognize question-answer relationship. But it is a skill which they are going to need anyway, and which they should be able to transfer from their reading and writing paper. So they have to identify the type of question which requires a recall or right there information. And of course, for everybody, timing is important. So they don't need to write a long sentence. They just need to write as few words as possible, a phrase which encompasses the answer. And of course, they should pay attention to multi-step instructions because they are going to need to answer a question related to that. As mentioned before, what is a question which they would ask to get more information in that particular context? And what is a request which is appropriate to the general topic, not the context of that presentation, but the general topic. Now, the assessor, the role of the assessor. In your situation, it might be the examinations coordinator, but somebody has to be responsible to see that the candidates are in a sterile area in terms of lack of noise, lack of, traffic, in terms of human traffic and so on. And if you are being examined for how you are managing an examination, this particular item here is important, but it should work for every examination. You need to have a working clock, which is visible to candidates. So you give them their examination paper, you allow them to enter their biographical details, so they should be able to write their names, the number, the date, and so on. Then you play the audio file, and the next stage is the finish. You collect the papers, and for stages 1 and 2, the answers provided by the City and Guilds London office are used because these are objective type questions, and so there is one correct answer only, and the City and Guilds London office provides that question. So I know that teachers are full of the milk of human kindness, and they might say, but this is close, this seems like the person understood. Don't display the milk of human kindness this time, do it before. You just use the answers which London has provided. Okay. Now for stage 3, it is similar for items 1 to 4. Those are recall type questions, and they are provided, the answers are provided. For items 5 and 6, you are going to be guided by the relevance of the response. And this is what I have found from my experience, this is where the milk of human kindness flows excessively. And sometimes teachers tend to give credit for answers that are not really very relevant. So you have to use some judgment when you are marking items 5 and 6, because the candidates have some leeway in terms of the answers which they give. After this has been finished, you complete the assessment record for each candidate. You will notice that when you have done the assessment record for the 2 tasks for stages 1 and 2, your internal quality assurer should sign and date. So you have 2 signatures there, that of the assessor and that of the IQA. For the schools which are going to be, or I should say the centers which are going to be externally assessed, that is, you are going to have an external quality assurer there. The external quality assurer will also sign and date the samples which he or she has listened to, and will sign that. Yes, you notice for the assessment record that so for the listening, yes, if you can, just a minute, Ms. Reed is trying to increase the print size. But you will notice that you have a variety. Okay, you can see on the marking guide that the answers are there for you. So you see here for the discussion. Let's look at the discussion here. It says starts at present. Yes. Okay. All right. Since the stage 3 first in this presentation, we look at that. It says speaks confidently in a way that suits the situation throughout the presentation. Now we want to have some general agreement about speaks confidently. We would expect to see eye contact. We would expect to see enunciation. We would expect to have an absence of ahs and wells and so on. So we would expect to have fairly uninterrupted delivery, and the candidate should maintain eye contact because the candidate should not be reading anything. The candidate is allowed to take a blank card or sheet of paper into the room and to make bullet point jottings. But the candidate is not allowed to take anything into the room. So you can vary if there's no confidence. If there's confidence part way, then that will be 1 because it's not throughout. And so it would be 2 full marks if all the criteria are met. Demonstrates the organization and sequencing of information and ideas. When we come to look at that, we will see that in the same way that a candidate has to organize material for a written activity, this candidate has to do the same thing. So we are going to be looking for topic sentences, we are going to be looking for supporting ideas, and we are going to be looking for transitions as the candidate moves from one point to another. So the organization and sequencing, we are going to be looking at that. And you would have trained your students for the writing process. So they are just going to be doing a transfer of skills here. Gives an effective explanation or account. There are 2 places where you can give an effective explanation or account. You can give the effective explanation or account when you are questioned by the peer. You know, the peer is going to ask some questions, at least 2 questions after the presenter is finished. So the effective explanation or account would come in there. And the effective explanation or account would also come in the presentation where the candidate explains, gives details, etc. during the point of presenting. So there are those 2 different areas where you would get that. Multi-step instructions. The candidate is expected to give a call to action at the end of the presentation. So the call to action would involve giving information about steps to be followed in order to make sure that the change recommended is effective. Responds confidently to detailed or extended questions. No, the responder, and we have that later in the presentation here, the responder does not have control over the quality of question which is posed by the peer. And therefore, if the peer asks convergent questions which require just yes or no, then the candidate who's responding should not be penalized. The confident response is an informed, informative response. So if the question is detailed or extended, then the response should be detailed or extended. Can't be a yes or no. But if, as I said, the question is faulty, then the response has to be accepted, whatever it is. Response to criticism or criticizes constructively. Both the presenter and the listener will have to be graded for this. And so the presenter should be willing to accept the constructive criticism. Now, constructive criticism is a suggestion as to what could have been done better, not what was done badly. So instead of saying that I did not hear enough information on a particular aspect of the topic, the constructive approach would be, you could have given us some more examples about X or Y. You could have gone into more detail in developing the point about Z, so that the person who is listening really benefits by knowing that this is what I could have done to improve my presentation. And the person should in turn constructively criticize. So you both accept and give constructive criticism. Speaks confidently. Yes, if you have questions, ask afterwards. Mr. Reed, that's the meeting people. No, speaks confidently in a way that suits the situation throughout. We mentioned something about confidence before, that suits the situation. You are responding, the participant is to respond to what a peer has said. So the way what suits the situation is a response to the particular question. And speaking confidently in a way that suits the situation speaks also to the use of standard English. You will notice that in the marking guide, they say you should not penalize the student for what we would call non-standard English. At the outset of the launch of the qualification, we expressed a concern about the fact that there was no mark awarded for English language, the use of English language. And they suggested that we should wait until the children are competent in the use of English before entering them for the exam. Well, you know our language situation that we are going to, they have to become, perfect over time. And so the decision was that 1 mark in this category would be given for the use of standard English because it is a formal situation, and so the language register, which is appropriate, is standard English, and so that is where that goes. We looked at demonstrating the organization and sequencing of information and ideas, and you see that if they do that all the time, they most of the time they get 2. If they need some, 1 or none, 0. This is important because we don't want to be awarding marks which are not reflective of the student's capability. If we do that, we will put the acceptability of the qualification in jeopardy, and we will not have validity across the different islands, different centers. And so this is why you have this detailed breakdown of what is 2, what is 1, what is 0. And we have looked at most of the other things, but I wanted to look at this to make you see that this is where you have your guidance, and you should use it in filling out the section on candidate marks. And then, you know, at the end, you are going to have it signed off. The assessor has to sign off, and the internal quality assurer and the external. Okay. So we'll get back to the PowerPoint. Okay, as we mentioned before, and as you are aware, we have the discussion for all groups. Please do not put more than 5 members in the group. You have a limited time for the discussion, and each member has to fulfill each of the assessment criteria. So, in order to provide enough time for each group member to participate, you should not have more than 5 members. If you have a very large cohort, then you would contact the representative office and you would ask for extra time for your candidates. But do not increase the number of participants based on the fact that you have a large number in your cohort. You would have got your topic yesterday, and you would have sent this out to the candidates. You are not to group your students before the day of the examination. They are not going to be doing a rehearsed presentation. The time that they will have to rehearse it is in the half an hour which they are given as preparation time. And here again, you would have given them guidance because you would have been practicing them during the term when they were doing formative assessments. So we now go to the exam preparation. Now, as I mentioned in passing, get them to identify and find definitions for the key words. So everybody should come with a definition of mental health, for example, because they are going to speak to that definition. And I want to mention here that every member of the group does not have to give the definition. We sometimes find this, that each person in the group starts off by giving a definition. Once we have got the definition, we just work with it. Now, the reason they have been given this 1 week to prepare is so they can do research. The research to get the definition, the research to support or to oppose the moot. So you might say, I agree that so and so and so. However, one needs to consider so and so. So they are going to be looking at all the perspectives from which you can approach this moot. I know that in many cases, once candidates go home for Easter holiday, they do not return until it is time for the exam. But you could suggest them that in their many meetings in their chat rooms when they are talking to their friends, they could practice their virtual discussions and so, you know, sharpen themselves so that when they do come to do the exam, they will be better prepared and they'll be more confident. And the key ones, you know, will take up the suggestions. Some of them might even take initiative and do that themselves. What is an idea you could suggest to them that they could do their practice, and so they would be exposed to some of the ways that they can proceed when they do the actual exams. Now, you should have been doing this with them, but if you haven't, you could suggest that to them, because most schools have WhatsApp groups for their students and so on. If somebody starts with a controversial statement, then another member of the group is going to be automatically engaged in countering it or responding to it in some way. Or if they have a question, which is a divergent question, which would then cause other members of the group to become engaged. So we don't want a matter of people sitting in a group and saying things, but the things are not interactive. A discussion is meant to be interactive. So people need to say things which provoke a response, or they have to call on individual to respond. You get somebody in that group who's a talkative person, and who will pull in others. So you need to get them not to just come with their question because they know they will get marks for asking questions. They are to respond because they are developing a skill which they will need later in life to participate in discussions. So they are not passing this exam, they are developing a skill. And of course, the information which they have researched, they would be using to answer questions asked in the group or to support the point or the perspective they have. They would need that. And the question of when the point which talks about contributing to the discussion, they need to move it forward. They can't simply repeat a point which somebody else has made unless they are going to give you some additional information on it. And so they could ask and answer questions in order to move forward, because more than one response can be given for a question. But the point at issue is that they must be aware that their contribution must move the discussion forward to some kind of resolution. Now, in Jamaica, we have a sort of standard response. When somebody is speaking and we want to butt in, we say, "Me now put in a but so and so." Well, we are not going to use that phrase. We are going to suggest, could I add something? I'm sorry to interrupt, but may I, pardon me, but I really believe that, could I suggest something? Excuse me, could I make a suggestion? I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you explain? I apologize for the interruption, but I have an important point here. Can I jump in? Can I add something? May I interject? Sort of button, but I think so and so. So you have to use phrases for interruption, because in real life, you will interrupt people as they speak. And so we want to have that. So that would be the verbal aspect. And you may use verbal interruptions to reassure group members, but whether you agree or disagree, but you may also use non-verbal gestures, and we have a few of them there, and the students know that, the nodding of the head, one way, the shaking of the head, the high five, whatever. So you can use both verbal and non-verbal means of reassuring group members that you agree with what they are saying and so on. Now, with regard to we're looking at the candidates. Now, with regard to the assessor, they need to interpret the criteria correctly. We have some additional information in the FAQ, and we have a little in the marking guide, which is provided by, that's the exam marking guide, which is provided by Logger. We need to make sure that we understand that, and I tend to find that the main area is multi-step instructions. So we need to make sure that both people understand and interpret the criteria correctly so that there is no disparity of response between the assessor, internal quality assurer, and external quality assurer. With regard to the keeping the candidates under supervision during the 30 minutes preparation period, they are still in an exam. We don't want anybody to come in and give them ideas and tell them what to say and what not to say. And so this is why some supervision has to be provided. We have sometimes had a difficulty with assessors or internal quality assurers who prompt their candidates when there is a breakdown or a pause in the discussion or presentation. Make sure that your group leader is assigned this task of pulling people in. So, Marjorie, what do you think about Alice's comment? Is there someone in the group who would like to give an alternative perspective? So the prompting must come from inside the group. It cannot and should not come from the assessor or external quality assurer or internal quality assurer. It is the candidates who are displaying their competence. Now, sometimes there's only one assessor. It is somewhat difficult for one assessor to maintain the completion, the proper completion of the examiner record sheet for 5 candidates simultaneously. Over time, some of us have become expert at that. We know how to fix our paper so that we can monitor and be able to have evidence for the marks we have given when it comes to conferencing after the activity has been completed. However, it is important, and I think we suggested that you should have 2 assessors. So even if there's only one person delivering the qualification, then it is advisable to train someone else to assist in managing the 5 candidates. The examiner record sheet requires quite a bit of information. Besides each assessment criterion, the examiner has to write evidence for why that candidate has been given 320 marks. And so in order to be able to make his detailed comments on each participant in the discussion, there is need for a second assessor for 5 candidates. Now, the IQA needs to sample the scripts and sign off on the marks awarded. This is crucial. If there is no sampling, whether during the preparatory period or during the exams, then that examination record is invalid. And one of the really large red flags on a center status is the lack of sampling by the internal quality assurer. And so that is why there is space on the assessment record sheet for the 2 signatures, for the assessor and for the internal quality assurer.
I'm gonna share one.
No, while we are looking at that, I want to point out that the internal quality assurer may not be able to move to different rooms simultaneously. However, the performance can be recorded and the internal quality assurer would be able to listen to look at the detailed notes made by the assessor and to see if he or she agrees with what has been recorded there. When we come to look at the examiner, at the external verification report, there is actually a section on that report which asks if the marks were verified. They ask you if the marks were verified and if the assessor, they have to write the date when the IQA verified the assessment, and the EQA would have to state whether they agree with the assessment or with the marks that have been given during the assessment, or if they disagree, then they would have to say why. And so you have to make sure that the signing is done. We're just going to look a little at one examiner record sheet sample. All right, so here we have this examiner record sheet, and this was done.
We're not seeing it.
You're not, okay, they're not seeing it, so let's try.
One second.
Okay, while they're trying to get it, get you to see it better, I'll just make a point here. This was actually done, this examiner record sheet was done from a demonstration lesson, which we are going to see later. So some people might have met it before. We want to look at the kind of notes made there. I have had the experience of going to being assigned to check a center and to find there were no comments at all on the students' performance. So I had no way of judging the validity or invalidity of the marks awarded. Okay, I hope we can see. Now I'll read aloud for you. So we have the candidate's name.
You have replaced it with the plain sheet.
Not seeing it.
Are you seeing it now?
No.
All right, we'll wait until you can see it. I won't
Okay. Let's see.
Yeah, it's back.
Okay, it's up now.
but I can't see it. You can see it.
I can see.
I can't see it, so
Yes.
All right. Since you can see it, I can't read it for you because I can't. But what you will notice is that there is a comment to justify the mark that was given to the student. Can everybody align those two now?
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to go without my guidance because I can't see. But you can see that okay, they're trying to get things right. But basically, we don't have an enrollment number because this was not done in an exam. This was done as a demonstration lesson. We have the topic of the presentation, we have the length of the presentation, the group size is 2 because it is a speaker and a listener, and we have the date. Now, you notice here that the candidate got 2 marks, maintained eye contact, spoke fluently, modulated her voice. So you can see why the student got full marks. Now, when it comes to demonstrating organization, definition, causes and effect of climate change, personal opinion on the topic supported with evidence, yes. Then went on to give 4 multi-step instructions with different steps and follow-up for each step. So you can see that there is organization and sequencing. Gives an effective explanation or account, full marks here, explain causes, effects, and multi-signs. Each multi-step had at least 3 different steps, gave examples for each. These are practical steps. She also used credible source of authority. Multi-step instructions that can be followed. She gave examples and steps to follow for each of the following multi-step instructions. Drive less and walk more, conserve water, conserve electricity, spread the word. Responds confidently to detailed or extended question, presented brilliant ideas, was confident, and maintained eye contact. Talked about working in groups for safety and using trending songs and attractive colors to in messages about climate change on social media. Responds to criticism and criticizes constructively. Simonique was very kind not to criticize her peer, even though she knew that she was nervous. I think this one could have been improved, but you get the general idea that you need to give some detail for the mark you have given. Okay, so we are going back to our PowerPoint presentation. Okay, we won't bother to look at the stage 2 examiner report sheet because I think I've got the point. Now, in preparation for the presentation, the stage 3 candidates will use the research material in their presentation. It's just that they are going to shape it differently because they are going to be doing an extended talk rather than an interactive as in the group. Okay, as mentioned before, they would have a previously assigned topic. I actually had the experience of going to observe an exam where candidates had a variety of topics. Somehow they got it into their heads that they could create their own topic. This would not support the idea of validity and equity. Everybody needs to talk on the same topic, you know, provided by London. And so you can't, you know, a candidate cannot just choose a topic which he or she finds interesting and so on. So that thing about previously assigned topic is important. This presentation, and that they have to answer the questions and they have to demonstrate the ability to criticize constructively, to accept criticism. And in doing so, they have to evaluate the presentation of the peer. Now, I think that people might need a little guidance on the ability to, you know, criticize constructively and so on. There is a section on the peer evaluation form which asks the peer to say, you know, what went well and what could have been improved. So if we use the sandwich technique, we're going to start off by saying, you know, what the person did very well, and then you say what could have been improved. That will ensure that there is no defensiveness, and you would have prepared your candidates to recognize that this is part of the examination, and so they should not take it personally, you know, if the peer suggests that you could have done so, or, you know, you could have done so. So they need to see it not as a peer trying to tear them down, but as a peer trying to build them up by showing them how they could have improved what was done. So once you have that kind of perspective, it makes a great deal of difference. So we want to teach our children to recognize what is good and how you can help somebody to do better. Okay, so that's that. They, as I said before, they are going to decide. Will they do an expository individual presentation where you simply explain, or will they decide to do a persuasive presentation? So let's look at that. If they are going to do an expository presentation, then they need to transfer what they learned about in extended writing. So they are going to be looking at how they can develop their paragraphs. This would lend itself to comparison contrast. If you're talking about mental health, you know, what will happen if you don't have it in the curriculum as opposed to if you have it? You know, they would appeal to authority because they would have done some research and they would be able to quote somebody, you know, of authority who said so and so, why you should have it in the curriculum, or somebody else who says why you shouldn't have it in the curriculum. So they would also be looking, they might decide to use chronological sequence. You know, they might decide to suggest that, you know, there was a time when nobody paid attention to mental health, but beginning at X time in terms of year, began to see that this was important and so on. And they might have found out that there are some schools in some places which have mental health as part of their curriculum. They might have some evidence to say, you know, what difference this made to the students and so on. So if it is expository, they are going to use those kinds of ways to organize their information and so on. Now, if it is persuasive, then they are going to be using some other techniques. You would expect them, for example, to make use of the rhetorical question. You definitely want to expect them to appeal to their audience, in terms of don't you think, so and so, and pull them in and so forth. So that they are going to be using both emotional and rational appeals. So the rhetorical question there would be more on the emotional side, whereas the appeal to authority and the use of evidence, which they have researched, would be, a balance there. And of course, they could use their own experience in both persuasive and expository presentations and talk about experiences which their audience, which is an audience of their peers, because they would have all been exposed to situations which create mental health challenges and so on. And the whole breakdown of mental health that came out of COVID and the behavior in school and so there's quite a bit which they can bring to their audience, which will make their presentation appropriate to the audience and situation. This we mentioned before, the sequence multi-step instruction, directions, call for action, whether they are calling to the ministry, whether they are calling to their peers, and their parents, their teachers, whatever. They would have to say, you need to do X, Y, Z, P. And of course, we mentioned the need for the information from research. Very important. They need to practice timing their speech. They have this topic. They know they have to do a speech on it. They need to practice. Remind them that they need to practice the speech. They are not going to learn it like a recitation, but they need to practice it so that they will know if they have enough content for the time, if they have too much content, if they have too little content. That is very important. So they need to do that. Okay, I have mentioned that before about the presentation that the presenter does not have control over the quality of the questions posed to him, her. It is the peer who is posing those questions, and so one has to bear that in mind, that the peer should have been coached to understand the difference between questions which require convergent answers and those which require divergent answers. Okay, with regard to the peer evaluation form, there was a time in the early stages when the peer evaluation form was actually used as part of the assessment of the candidate. We explained that we thought that this placed the presenter at a disadvantage because we did not think that the peers had enough experience to give a valid assessment. However, the London thought that the exercise was a valuable one, and you will find that there are some questions on the peer evaluation form which are necessary for the assessment of the presenter. So the whole question of, what could have been improved, what went well, the impact on the mark for accepts criticism and being able to give constructive criticism. So those things need to be done. And you would have, I imagine, walked your candidates through the process so that they would know what needs to be done. So here we are, we have the presenter's name and we have the listener's name. And the presenter has to give a reflection based on what the peer had said. And so this is where the accepts criticism comes out. So here we have, we have to do the talk first. So we do the reflection, but you bear in mind that the reflection is based on the response of the peer.
Someone in the chat said, I just told my students to write a speech on the theme. So should their preparation be around the theme or the mood?
I would imagine that the students at this time would be preparing the mood because that is what was given. However, the preparation should not be teacher fueled. It is examination tips and guidance that should be given. We would not expect that this presentation would be like a graded, pre-graded exercise. So we would expect detailed guidance like I was giving about paragraph development and approach and strategy, but we would not expect that the assessor would have marked the candidate's presentation prior to the examination. But the idea of giving the mood is to make sure that the candidate is prepared. Okay, so here we are now. This is the presenter reflecting on what the peer said. She thought my information was sequenced, but I was a bit nervous. I accept the fact that I was a bit nervous and I will definitely work on my confidence. She thought that I supported my points with evidence. So you see that this candidate has accepted the criticism of her peer and that this criticism was constructive because she did, tell her what went well, and she then suggested, the area of weakness. So here we are where they circle the number that reflects your judgment. This should not influence the assessor. These marks were spoke with confidence, information was sequenced, gave clear explanation. It should not influence the assessor. The assessor should have observed this and should have noted it in the examiner record sheet, in those slots provided. Here, this will give me an example to show you how sometimes our students might wobble a bit. She says, I like the fact that Simonique was very confident and her information was sequenced, but she tells us that Simonique was nervous. Anyway, it could be that, at some point, but I'm just pointing out what I had said to you before, that your observation should take priority over that of this candidate. All right, so she says, what question did you ask, Simonique? You mentioned that we should walk more for short distances. How short is it, or safe is it for youngers to walk to school? I think it is at this point that she mentioned in her response that they should walk in groups. You mentioned that we need to spread the word about climate change in social media. How can you make these messages interesting enough for young people to like, share, and something to these platforms? And I think she answered by talking about using color and so on. Right, so we are here now.
Okay, stop sharing and going back to the phone.
Okay, so we just looked at the peer evaluation form and you see how the candidates will manage that. I think maybe at this time I should pause and take some questions because we are going to move now to the other side. Oh, we have the assessment grading, which you are aware of. One thing I want to say is that we want to encourage our students, candidates, learners to aim for the top. For a mark of 70 or distinction, you have access to the this candidate will be accepted for matriculation to English language for the University of the West Indies and some other places. That is where English is a requirement for the course and not the subject area in which this candidate is going to specialize. And so you really want to get this into their head so that they will aim for the best. There are other areas which will accept the pass and so on. But if they want to get into that pathway one, we want to encourage them to do that. Okay. You're going too fast. All right. I'm going to stop at this point because we are finished with the candidates somewhat. We are going to be moving now to the assessors and their responsibility with regard to satisfying City and Guilds requirements and having a successful interaction with the external quality assurer. So I'm going to pause here and give a
There's
chance.
a question in the
Yes.
chat. All right. Before I read the question, I'm inviting you to just unmute and ask your question so it's more interactive, but I'll just read this one that's here in the chat. So the assessor for presentations to assess the oral separately from the students. What if the students are generous in their assessment, but you see otherwise? So you're saying, what if the peer was generous in their evaluation, but you think that the grade or the comments given is not fitting? How should this be treated?
Okay, now this is the one time when I think you should do a little reinforcement. So you would say to the peer, remember, and you would share what is there on the peer evaluation. Remember, you are asked to make a suggestion as to what could have been improved. So I want you to think back on the presentation and see one area where there could have been any improvement. It may be that there is none, but in terms of what happened, but since they are requiring you, to get a mark for that, nobody is perfect, but I understand. You could, prompt the person think of the content, think of the delivery. Is there anything that you think could have been done? Let's say you have given her 99. Is there anything else she could have been done that could have been done to get the 100? I understand your situation, but I'm trying to solve the problem given the fact that the student has to get the 1. And if all else fails, then the student will need to get the 1 mark, if the person could not the person should not get 0 for not accepting criticism. You understand? If there's no criticism, but the other one now, who is supposed to be able to criticize constructively, can't get any mark because that person did not criticize constructively. You understand?
It doesn't throw off the entire thing. It's just a 1 mark.
Yes, but the 1 mark can put you from you know, one category to the other. I hope I have helped you. It's a judgment call.
Hi, good afternoon. Good morning. May I go ahead and ask a question?
Good morning, you may go ahead. And then after you, we have Miss McCain.
Mhm.
All right. So my question is, read the presentation. I know that the mood is for the discussion. Read the presentation. We are responsible for creating, let's say, presentation topics under the theme for the stages under stage 3.
No, the moot is going to be the discussion topic. You see, as I mentioned before, if everybody was allowed to create a theme for the presentation, there would be no parity or validity. And
Okay.
so in order to have everybody doing the same thing across the board, then there is a given moot.
So they present both on the mood and then they do their discussion on the mood as well. Do I have
Right.
that correct? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes, there is a slide that mentioned that they would use the same, basically same information, but it will be shaped differently because a discussion would proceed differently from a presentation.
Okay, thank
Okay. We have Miss McCain next.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear quite clearly.
Okay. Good morning, Mrs. Grant.
Good morning.
My question was the one you repeated earlier, but I got bounced off, and so I didn't hear all of what you had to say. But in the section where the students have to rank 1 to 5, I found that some of them were very generous. So they were giving their friends 1 for speaking confidently and so on. But that was not the case. Do I count?
Okay.
Or that's what, yes.
All right. Yes, you did get bounced off. I explained that in the early stages of the exam, this peer evaluation sheet was used as part of the assessment of the presenter. However, we pointed out to London that students were not competent enough to judge their peers and have this impact the outcome of the peers assessment. And so while the document is still used, what is important from that document is not those marks 1 to 5 for the different segments. It is the judgment of the assessor that is going to deal with that section of the assessment. What is important from the peer evaluation sheet is what the peer writes about what could have been improved, because the only way you can get that mark for accepting, the only way the presenter can get the mark for accepting criticism is when the peer writes the criticism and then the presenter up at the reflection part accepts the criticism, right? So that is where 1 mark comes from that peer evaluation form. Another mark comes from the questions, but you will be listening, you know, the assessor will be listening and hear the questions asked and hear the peer's response. So all of that about speaking with confidence, etc., that is just an exercise which London says that the students need the experience, but it is not going to determine the mark which a student gets. It is the assessor who is going to determine what mark the student gets for spoke with confidence. The information was sequenced, gave clear explanations, adapted contributions, supported opinions with evidence, responded to questions. It is the assessor is going to determine that. So even though the peer gives these gradings and so on, it is not going to impact the mark which the candidate, the presenter gets for those assessment criteria.
Okay, thank you so much. Just one last question.
No, don't apologize for the questions. I want to hear.
The adapted contributions, is that where they indicate with their source for their research?
Adapts means that one adjusts. So I say, you were not hearing me, so Miss Reed had to adjust the volume. So she adapted the volume to the need. So I'm saying that to say this, that adapts contributions means that if I am part of this group, whatever I contribute in terms of what I say must be relevant to the contributions of my peers. So my response to Ms. Reed's comment must be relevant to that comment. It cannot just be something which I researched, and since I know I'm going to get points for what I contribute, I just say it. My response to Ms. Reed's question must be relevant and must move the discussion forward. So adapting contribution means whatever I am contributing, whether it's a question or a statement, it is relevant to what is going on in terms of other explanation, then my explanation should be adapted and relevant to the question which I am explaining or to the request which somebody made for explanation.
We're not hearing.
There's no audio.
Hi, good day, everyone. Am I the only one not hearing?
I'm also not hearing.
No, we are not
Only
hearing
one.
either.
All of us not hearing. So something went
The
wrong.
host lost signal. Miss Huldah.
Okay, we had lost contact. So now I'm going to go over that. I had pointed out that in the initial stages, when the qualification was introduced, the peer evaluation form was actually used as part of assessment of the candidate. However, we pointed out to London that we did not believe that our students had enough expertise to use this form to affect the outcome of the assessment for their peers. We felt they did not have enough experience. And as you said there, that they, from your experience, they tend to be too generous. So as a result of that, London agreed that they should continue to use the form, but the form would not impact the marks which the candidate, the presenter would get. So that section about speaks with confidence, sequence information, and so on, it is the assessor's judgment that is going to determine the marks, not the peers. So whether they circle 1 or 5 is not going to affect the peer. What London said is that they need in practice. What is on that form that is going to affect here is that section which talks about criticizes constructively and accepts criticism. So you will see that the peer wrote on the form that the presenter was nervous. The presenter, in her reflection, accepted that she was nervous. Now, another thing which is important is that the peer has to ask the candidate questions, and the candidate needs to respond. With regard to that first issue of the constructive criticism, the presenter should not be penalized if the peer does not offer any criticism in terms of accepting, because if none is offered, then the person cannot accept, and they should not be penalized because the peer did not come up with any. So they should get the 1 mark. However, the peer who failed to criticize constructively cannot get any mark for criticizing constructively. However, I would expect that during the preparation, the peers would have been criticizing their classmates constructively, saying, I think you could have maintained better eye contact. I think it would have helped if you had given some more examples. I think maybe you could have explained the term so and so and so, right? So it is incumbent on both, as they exchange roles, to be able to criticize constructively. But the person who gets no criticism cannot respond to it and should not be penalized for not responding to something you didn't get. I hope that helps you.
Good morning to everyone. A big concern is that regular classes are usually disrupted in order to accommodate the speaking and listening exams. Teachers have to put in a lot of work to get the job completed. However, there is no compensation package. No encouragement is given to strengthen the teachers' efforts and assistance. Should the city and guilds take into consideration a compensation packages for teachers, or could it be hire a set of individuals to get the job done? I don't think that this is a question for Ms. Bryan. Speaking as a city and guilds rep, we do understand and appreciate the work that you put in. It's a lot. I do agree. However, the decision to make payments or to provide payments is not made by our office. It's really the Ministry of Education that would have to do that. So if you have any concerns as that is related, I'm encouraging you to direct it to your EO or your regional director, and it will reach to the highest person.
May I interrupt here?
Sure.
We have had that concern before the fathers fell asleep. And we have argued because we understand that this affects the interaction between the IQA and the EQA, you know. But we have argued that it's the ministry which entered into a contract with city and guilds on those terms with regard to SBA. And from the outset, we said that this matter should be raised with the principals for them to raise it with the ministry, because there are two exams and there should be some kind of parity in terms of how they are treated. And so this whole question of SBA, it has come up before. There are both SBAs and there's a record keeping that is needed, etc., etc. And so it is not my remit, but I have lived with it. You know, from the beginning, you know, when I started out with this exam, and as you know now, I am just, well, I suppose I'll have to call it a consultant, because I no longer work with city and guilds. I just come to assist when they need assistance.
Right.
So I understand and I empathize, but that's the way it is.
There's a hand by Miss Ellis. I think it's not Najuma Ellis. There's a question there. Also, after we have Miss Ellis's question, I just want to ask if our colleagues in Cayman and Barbados who will be doing the assessment, if you're on the call, are you clear with what is expected of you? Is there any direct question you have of Miss Bryan ahead of the assessment next week? Now is the time to ask that. So go ahead, Miss Ellis. I'm gonna ask you to unmute and just ask a question.
Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me. So along with the other concerns about compensation and so, is it a case where we are now just receiving all this information and the assessment for the students are next week? There's no time to adequately prepare them if we're just getting the information now. So our added stress is now being added to us once again because the information is not sent.
Okay.
Timing. And moreover, yes, the concern is there. Where are the EOs for us to address them about the concern that we have? I don't think it is fair that every single year we're in the same forum and then nobody can present or talk to us about the compensation. If the students are paying 30 or whatever it is to get their money, and I'm sure someone in Jamaica can advocate for teachers to get compensated or for them to send officials to mark the exams themselves. So you telling us that you understand what we're saying, it does seem like you're slapping us in the face right now.
May I interrupt? We had a workshop. I'm not part of this organization, but I'm telling you that. We had a workshop was it October or September? We had a workshop in October at the beginning of the school year. This is a support workshop to that. We normally have a workshop at the beginning, in the first term of the academic year. And we had that workshop. This is just a supplemental one. And is you need to understand, despite your animals, that I am just a trainer here. I'm not part of the organization in terms of decision making. And we, from the beginning, this is what we told people, and that the ministry entered into a contract with City and Guilds. They are the ones who set the terms there. And so from that beginning, the issue should have been raised with the ministry. One, I have no, I have no standing in all of this kind of thing.
Okay, Miss, thank you for your response.
Good afternoon, Ms. Reed.
Good afternoon.
This is Kellyanne Barrett from Barbados.
Hi, Miss Barrett. How
Yes,
are you?
please. I am fine. And yourself?
I'm well.
Yes. I know this question is not for Ms. Bryan, but based on what was just shared, we in Barbados, I can speak for my school, and I think one or two other colleagues here, we also have that challenge with receiving information late, and we would have reached out to our ministry. And I don't know how much more I can say besides the fact that I believe they have reached out to you. So I can probably have that conversation with you a little later after this session.
All right, let me just provide clarity, and I'm seeing it here in the chat. All right, so we do a workshop the start of every year. It's usually in October, where we sensitize people about speaking and listening. We also provide you with the materials from last year so the students can get practice. Colleagues, I want you to understand that it's an exam, it's an assessment, it's an exam. We cannot share the topic like a month before. That would be too much preparation for the students. It wouldn't be valid to be an assessment at that point. What we do share early is the theme. So we share the theme and the word list from January so they can start sensitizing themselves, work their head around what words they're expected to know and understand and spell. Well, not even spell, because it's speaking and listening. We also share the link with the handbook and all of that. So I do believe that the information is shared early. The only information that cannot be shared is the research question, the mood, the topic. It cannot be shared from September because that's too much preparation for an exam and an assessment. So it would not be valid. I hope you understand what I am saying. So for instance, we know that the theme was education. One of the things that the students could have been doing or the teachers could have been doing is to make up a mood or research question that you think would come surrounding the theme.
But that's the only way that the students would practice, if you made up questions, based on the theme. Are there any other?
I can ask for 2 weeks, but I'm telling you, they always say 1 week before. So for next year, I'll see if they'll be more flexible to provide it 2 weeks before, especially because it's usually around the Easter time, so maybe the students can prepare more at home. I will advocate and ask, but the decision lies with London. So I'll do that for you. This workshop is geared specifically to speaking and listening, so that's why it might seem more detailed. The one in October we have touched on most components of the English qualification. That would be reading and writing and speaking and listening. And they would have also gone through the chief examiner's report. But we have been sharing last year's research question and topic, which was fashion, and to have the students do some preparation and feel of what the speaking and listening exercise is like.
Are there any more questions about procedure? in terms of delivering the exam before we go to the role of what is required from the assessors and the internal quality assurance?
Yes, Miss, I have one question.
Go ahead,
Mrs.
please.
McCain. All right. So you explained for the presentation, which is done in pairs, what is graded there by the assessor. Understood. For the discussion, we also observe the discussion. And this, you must, basically you're saying we should arrange the group so that you have a strong person in there that will carry the conversation, so to speak.
I would think that you would have been doing that in practice, you know. I would think that you could do that for the exam, but I would think that they would have had practice and, you know, rotated people.
Okay. So that is how we should teach it and in preparation for. All right.
Yes, because it would be kind of, you know, it wouldn't be a wise idea to put 5 people who I have actually observed at the exam where a young miss refused to open her lips, you know, not at any point. She said nothing, absolutely nothing.
And that is a serious challenge. Even in class, they don't talk.
No,
so
but
that's why I asked.
Is this a Jamaican voice?
Yes, it is.
Yes, good. No, I will get up on the bee in my bonnet. The National Standards Curriculum has a speaking and listening strand from grade 1. And in grades 8 and 9, there are some assessment criteria which overlap with the City and Guilds assessment criteria. I can tell you that because I was one of the persons who worked on the National Standards Curriculum for the high school. I have been around a long time. So if they start with the people down there, by the time they get up, they won't hide from the exam in grade 11.
And just to add on that, you know, I've seen where a lot of recent graduates would come into office, and because of the lack of preparation with speaking and listening, they're unable to articulate what they want. You know, it's almost embarrassing. You know, have to be like, you know, you have to talk up. So it's important that they break out of their shell from now so that they can survive after school. There's a question here. How long should the stage 1 and stage 2 speaking and listening exam be?
The paper, there is a time given for the, well, first of all, for the listening. The time will be determined by the length of the audio file, which is to be played for 3 consecutive times. And then you just give them a little bit of time at the end to finish off. But each segment has the time on it. I think it's up to 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, for up to 10 minutes for the discussion. And we had that there. Up to 10 minutes for the discussion, and the presentation, I think it is up to 5 minutes.
So the question papers
yes, they have them there, and it is in the frequently asked questions, you know. The document called frequently asked questions has every detail about the length of the exam and the procedure to be followed. So I pointed there even the thing that the students should be practicing so they know, you know, how much content they can deliver in 5 minutes. So, you know, they should be familiar with the time.
So here I'm sharing a question paper on the screen now. And I think this is for stage 2. Just for example, this was around transportation. So you said the discussion should take at least 5 minutes.
And it can go up to 10.
Up to 10. I could share stage 1, but the question papers will let you know. All right. Let me see if there's any other question. I'm seeing a hand for a Tay. I know it's lunchtime and we're trying to wrap up, but we want to ensure that everyone is clear.
Hello? Hello? Are you hearing us? Are you
Go
hearing?
ahead. Yeah, I'm hearing.
All right, good morning. We were asking if all teachers within the language department, if they are suitable to be assessors. What's the requirement to be an assessor?
All you need, well, you need to be familiar with the procedure. But if they are in the English department, I am assuming that they have competence in the area. So that is it, because you will notice that when the EQAs come, they are going to ask your principal or whoever is in charge to show copies of the qualification of the people, because that is one of the things that has to go. So once they are there, I'm going to assume that they are qualified to teach English. And so all they need now is for you to give them some practice and make them familiar with the whole process of grading the students for the discussion. Any other question?
Yes, Miss. I have one more question.
Go ahead.
For the discussion, to when you're running the exam, it is to be one group at a time in the room, right?
Yes, it has to be, because the others will overhear and learn from them.
Okay, okay. All right, I got you. Thank you so much.
Let me just explain too what we have done to try to deal with the time factor in terms of the spread of time. Like, so we organize it. You don't have to do it like that. But whenever I'm going to visit a center, when I used to do that, I would advise the people, we are going to see 2 and 3. So while this particular group is doing their 30 minutes preparation, we could have either an individual presentation or some other activity. So what you timetable it so that you don't just sit there twiddling your thumbs for the 30 minutes that that first group is doing the preparation. Okay, we are going to assume that we are out of questions, so we can.
We have one hand.
Okay.
Hello.
Sure.
I have a question, please. Good afternoon, everybody. I just need some clarity. There seems to be a little bit of disparity for me as it relates to what you said with grouping should not be done ahead of the exam. For example, we do a lot of practice so because I want my students to be able to manage. So is it that it would be wrong if the groups they practice with during the school term be the same group they do the discussion with? Is that what you're saying when you say they should not be grouped ahead of time?
That would be wrong. That would be wrong. So you practice hold on. You practice them in their groups while you are preparing them for the exam. But on the day, and it actually says that in frequently asked questions, that on the day of the exam, they are going to be put in the group with which they will interact to do the exam. That is why they are given 30 minutes so that they can practice in their groups and develop some group synergy.
Okay, so do I do that grouping or the external examiner kind of do some random grouping on that day?
It is you who will do the grouping. On the
All right, thank you.
Because listen, normally schools do a schedule, so they might say that today 20 people are going to come, and you put down the 20 people that they know they are coming on Monday and another 20 coming on Tuesday, but they don't know which group they are going to be in, but you know that on Monday you are going to do 4 groups. You understand? So
no, I understand that, but because they were I understand, but because they were also saying that,
We need to do the grouping, ensure that there's a strong person in the group. And I was there thinking about, I'm like, but sometimes that will cause a problem in itself, because there are cases where, you know, students, we already know that they don't get along, there are internal issues, etc. So
Yeah.
sometimes in splitting up now and doing that randomly, I'm like, okay, let me make sure I understand that that's what you're saying. Not that I disagree, I just want to be sure that I get that that's what you're saying. So when I explain it to my students, again, that part, we are clear.
Assessor, you tell them, you see, that the external examiner told you X, Y, and Z, so that you know that Rashid does not like Sylvia, but they will have to sit in the group today, and then to break it down. You can use somebody else's name. Say that the City and Guilds presenter pointed out that, which is true. That's what part of what this thing is, to break down these things. That the
Yes,
so and
I will do that. I'll do that. I'll do that. Thank you for the clarity.
Okay, so we are going to assume that we can move on now. Somebody muting me? Okay, this is very important, this section, because it determines the status which your center will have. And I usually tell people that if you get if your students get 100.5% on the exam, but your center has not met the requirements, City and Guilds will not release the certificate. So this is why we are looking now at what it is that you have to do. Remember, our objectives dealt with what the candidates need to do and what the assessors need to do and the documents that are needed. So we are going to move on to that section now. Okay. Go back to the qualification document and support, because some of the questions suggest that people are not aware of this. Well, the qualification handbook, which is what we would in other exams call a syllabus, it details the skills, the assessment details, and it gives guidance. And then you have sample papers and marking guides, which you would have become familiar with, because you usually give candidates, you know, practice on these papers and so on. And the marking guides would cement for you what it is that you need to do in order to be thoroughly familiar with the procedure which you are expected to follow. The practice exam papers, again, the exemplar marking guide, which shows you, you know, they have details of how people contribute to a discussion and how they get marks and so on, and the external verifier. Now, one of the you see that English skills web address, it has a plethora of materials and guidance. At the beginning, when we started doing this, offering the qualification, as we went around to schools and saw the needs, we began to put materials, develop material. That frequently asked questions document was developed out of my experience of what teachers needed to know over time. There are materials there such as, there's this document here, how to listen to and evaluate a presentation, and it has a breakdown on each component, what it means to speak with confidence, what is sequence information, what it means to give an effective explanation, what it means to how to coach them for the peer evaluation. And this was done, as I have said before, the father's philosophy. In there, you have an example of a sampling plan. You have an example of the the comparison between the City and Guilds and speaking City and Guilds English and CSEC English A material that has been built up over time in what used to be the Dropbox, but that now is the place where you can access information. And so it seems that we have many new people who have not, who are not aware that all of the support material is there for them. We have lots of work material there to guide you. And of course, there's the smart board, which has quite a bit of material on the different aspects of both the reading and writing and speaking and listening. Okay, so we'll go back now to the documents. No.
Miss Golden is in there?
Reading and writing and speaking and listening. Okay, so we'll go back now to. No.
Miss Golden is in there?
People need to be muted. We can't hear. All right, go ahead. Okay, please go ahead now. No, you go ahead. Okay. No, in terms of the situation with the impending verification visit, there is even a section in the frequently asked questions document which tells you how to prepare for a visit by an EQA. The EQA wants to know if the center has been following the City and Guilds protocols. One looks at the candidate's workbook to see what kind of exposure to the, I will say syllabus, I'm used to that, but the units detailed in the handbook, what kind of exposure there is. Then you have the mock exams. Assessment that is to be noticed has to have some time factor on it. And this is why one does not focus so much on the diagnostic test, because that is very early and it would not give a reasonable reflection of where the candidate is performing by the time the EQA gets to the center. The mock exams would be more recent, and so they would be able, one could draw a fairly reasonably valid conclusion about where the candidates are. And why do we look at them? We want to see a pattern, in terms of where candidates are weak, where they are strong. Do we see an improvement on this? Is this same weakness reflected in the actual exams that we are observing and so on? No, the assessor's mark book. The assessor's mark book is important because if the mark book simply reflects marks for that candidate who is also doing CSEC English A, it suggests that the candidate has not been taken through the required units for the English skills qualification. So, and sometimes, you will see marks in the book, but the focus, they are not identifiable in any unit that has been covered in the English skills qualification. So in terms of, and you will look for things for both speaking and listening and reading and writing there, although it is reading and writing that the main focus is on. And as we said, there are records of speaking and listening assessments. Sometimes people that might not do it in a mark book, they are more, contemporary, so they might have it in an Excel file or what. All we are saying is that one needs to see that kind of evidence. So we need to see those things. the lesson plans, do these lesson plans reflect the units that are to be covered with the candidates? All the exams are based on work specified in the handbook for different units. So we want to be looking at those. We see lesson plans which are geared to preparing candidates, covering the work that needs to be covered. Sampling plan or records, that is so important. However you keep it, because sometimes people have individual records for candidates as opposed to, an overall one. This is crucial. If the IQA has not been sampling the assessment activities of the assessor, then there is no guarantee that this assessor has been standardized, that the assessor understands the assessment criteria. So this is how you are going to get internal quality assurance. This is a document that will show, yes, this has been happening. I went to Miss X's class at this Y time. I saw this unit. This is how the students were, performing. This is a strong lady, so I will send another person to watch her, and so forth and so on. The minutes of the meetings will let the EQA know if the issues connected with the delivery of the qualification have been addressed or are being addressed. So this is why documents like those are important. As I mentioned before, I once had an experience where, okay, I won't give that one. Just say that assessors and IQAs need to have subject competence. The center guide tells you that. The qualification status guidelines international tells you that, and common sense says that. You can't lead people beyond where you have gone. And so this is why this is asked for. Okay, let's move on. No, so the document, the documents that would help you would be the qualification status guidelines, which were mentioned, when we had the September thing, October, sorry. But the qualification status guidelines international would tell you what are the risks that could cause your center to lose its status. And that's about it. And of course, you will know that your center, the external quality assurer is going to complete an external verification report for you after seeing the center. And this report will be sent to the Caribbean Quality, and they will send it back to you if they are satisfied that the conclusions that the assessor, that the EQA drew from the evidence presented, if they are satisfied that that is valid, they will send it back to you, and they will give you some time to respond to say if you agree with what was presented. Okay, you may have some questions about, your, that is the internal quality assurer and the assessor, what they have to deal with when they get the external quality assurers visiting them during the exams.
Could we share the PowerPoint? It's your decision. They want the PowerPoint.
No problem.
Okay. I'm gonna share the PowerPoint now because we still have a lot of persons on the chat on the call, so that would be good. But do we have any more questions?
Yeah, let me see this question. I would have given my students, what is it now? The mock exams are for internal practice. So we do not require the results. No, for the mock exams, you keep them, and City and Guilds requires you to keep documents for 3 years. And by the way, too, when your EQA comes, they will ask you questions about where you store documents because they have to be secured, especially the examination papers. And so the external quality assurer will look at the mock exams. It will give them an idea of the validity of the marking, in terms of how marks have been awarded and whether there has been any intervention or any sampling, I should say, by the internal quality assurer. And I suggested some time ago for people who are old in this, the new ones might not have heard it, that since the head of department has to visit the teacher's class to assess the teacher anyway, based on the requirement of the ministry, it can overlap. They can choose make one of these visits to a speaking and listening class. So they could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But they have to see what is going on.
Intervention by the.
Hello?
Tell them that the documents are at that location.
So I've shared in the chat the PowerPoint that was used for this presentation. Sherry Ann, I'm seeing your question. I've shared the link. The link has all the materials. I'm not ignoring you. I shared the link. The link has the materials. I've also shared a sample, the sample of the peer evaluation, a sample of the examiner's record. So I've shared all of that in the chat already. Everyone should have the word list. Everyone should have the theme and the mood. Is there anything else that you would need? Everyone should have access to the quality academic. Okay.
Excuse me, just a quick question.
The link will work. Just allow it to load up. What will happen is that a lot of persons are clicking on it at once, so it will work.
Just a quick question. Are you hearing me?
Go ahead.
Yes, I was just wondering if all teachers, if all assessors should have access to the audio.
The audio is only required for when you have the students in front of you, so the person who will be assisting with assessment, then yes, they need to have access to the audio.
On the exam day?
On exam day, that is.
On the day of the exam. Okay, thank you.
I'm sharing the PowerPoint again. So, I mean, I do know that there's some takeaway for us from this meeting. You'd like for the mood to be shared a bit earlier. You're concerned around compensation, so your queries are not being ignored. They will be escalated, and we are hopeful that we'll arrive at some sort of mutual understanding or agreement. All right. You guys know where to reach us. Miss Brian is always here for support. If it is that you need any support, just
May
let
I
us know.
interrupt?
She's
No,
not
no,
always here.
no, when you say always here, they might think I'm part of the
Oh,
office.
no, she's, no. But
So
if you need
I'm
support, you
available
can arrange
online,
it.
but yes, because sometimes the questions people used to ask when I used to work, it made me think that they sometimes think that I'm part of the city admin's office. So that is,
All right, it's lunchtime for me at least, maybe you too. Today I'm late for the meeting on we, oh, Mushet, it was sent yesterday to the school, but let me just drop it here again. That was shared already, but I'll just drop it. And I also shared in the chat an example, a demo example of a presentation. Well, demo. Let me share about that link.
that is my question. Wait. I thought we would have used the one that has to do with artificial intelligence in the classroom because that is.
All right, so I've resent everything in the chat, and I hope that this session has been useful. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank Ms. Sylvia Bryan sincerely for her contribution. All that you have received is really from her. And I hope that you'll be able to use it when assessing and administering the examination. I'm wishing you all a good afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah, see you too.
first, you got